Chandra, and thanks everybody for joining us here tonight. We're really excited to have this conversation and to have all of you joining us for it. I just want to start off by saying, unfortunately, Paul Taylor, who is the executive director at FoodShare Toronto, is not able to join us tonight. So I urge you all to check out the great work that he's doing at FoodShare Toronto and the team. They've been doing a lot of fantastic work throughout COVID. And so it's too bad we can't hear from him, but we have lots of other great speakers here tonight. Anyway, so the first speaker that we have is Sheila Regeer. Sheila's a founding member of the Basic Income Canada Network, and she's the former executive director of the National Council of Welfare, which was unfortunately disbanded under Stephen Harper. Bad old days. She spent 29 years in the federal public service, and she's done frontline work, policy analysis, development, specifically focusing on gender and race, fairness and equality. And so we're really pleased to have you here tonight. Chandra and Sheila actually have a fantastic publication up at PCIN where they go through some of the options of a basic income that I encourage people to check out afterwards. So could you, Sheila, maybe just start us off by giving us some general background and what you see as a basic income and how our experience during the pandemic has given us some insights into how transformative a basic income could be for Canadians.
Great. Thank you, Angela and Chandra. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm going to give a short answer and a longer answer to that first question. So the basic description we use of a basic income is that it's a regular payment from government that ensures everyone is able to meet basic needs, participate in society, and live with dignity regardless of work status. So the key word in there, compared to what we're seeing with emergency benefits and things now, is everyone. So in Canada, we're fortunate that this isn't theory. We have examples of basic income-like programs in seniors benefits and benefits for families with children. So most people know what those are, so I won't go into an explanation. We also have, unfortunately, the perfect example of the opposite of a basic income, and that's social assistance. It's inadequate, it's punitive, it's stigmatizing. It's not regular. It really isn't income security because you can't count on it much. The second part of that response goes deeper, and it goes back to what you were talking about initially about the report that BICN put out, for whom Chandra is the brainchild and the lead of this project to put out policy options for Canada. So she's the lead author. We were blessed with the help of some of the best social policy experts in the world to consult with. I mean, in Canada, but known internationally as well. But we faced challenges in this that were unimaginable. And Chandra just stuck with it and kept pushing to get this done. So it's remarkable. So my answer is you must do homework and you must read this report. I can't tell you all about it in the few minutes we have today, but I want to emphasize how hard this work is to design and fund, which is where this report goes well beyond what most people have done, a basic income where we make sure that it's progressive, that it gets the results that we want, that we can actually measure those, and it's done according to our principles, which are outlined in the report along with all sorts of other considerations. So it's state of the art. I also want to emphasize how important it is right now, and it came out just about the time the first Canadian case of COVID was detected. So interesting timing here. It does what others don't. It's rigorous and it provides solid, workable alternatives. And we don't get that from other people. Our opponents generally have these loose claims about things like we should have more services instead of adequate money, not with money, but instead of adequate money. Or things we hear all the time that people are just going to stay home and play video games. Those things are not real. There is no evidence for that. And I think some of those people themselves are quite lazy and haven't done their homework. They don't have evidence. What they do have, I think, is fear in some cases of doing something different. What Hugh Siegel calls path dependency. It's like, we've done all of these things for so many years. Let's just try to make them better and not get too crazy. And the last one is more serious. And it's really unfortunate that Paul isn't here, because that one to me is based on prejudice. It's not just kind of misunderstandings about work disincentive. It is based on racism, sexism, and poor bashing. So now, and I'm speaking a little bit slower because I think I do have a couple of extra minutes now that Paul isn't here, right? And I'm so sad that he's not. But now let's look at pandemic experience and what we can take forward from this experience as we look at trying to help further transformation. So the first thing is that COVID exposed and magnified income security problems. So this is public recognition that they had to do something different, and that government, especially federal government, had to deal with national issues in a way that it had been kind of ignoring before. The second major thing is that CERB was a cash payment. So the realization of this by government was incredibly important. And it was $2,000 a month. Interestingly, about the same amount of money as our benefit provided in the policy options report. Very interesting. So the key thing about that is that cash matters. It is fast and it's fungible. That means you can use it for anything. You don't wait for a job creation program. You get to eat as soon as you get the money. The other key thing that I think was phenomenal, one of the things we deal with in the report are, some of the other changes that have to happen to make a basic income happen. And one of the things some of the opponents kept pointing to was that the tax system is too slow, it's too burdensome, you can't do all of these things. Well, delivering the CERB proved that the tax administration system has a capacity far beyond what anybody was ever led to believe, and that we can be responsive to changes in income. So that's great. BICN, along with some partners, then produced some CERB stories. And I think those stories are really important because we asked people, what their reaction was to the emergency benefits. And without fail, we got things like, we are so grateful to the government for this, but we all know somebody who's worse off, who's not getting it. And we worry about them, and we worry about what happens when this benefit ends, because we are all still precarious. So fast forward then to the speech from the throne, where there were rumors that there might be a basic income. We're all incredibly disappointed that didn't happen. And there are a few hints in there. Some are positive, some we really need to think about. So one, I think, is that it has reinforced path dependency, or what Chrystia Freeland, in her book that she wrote in 2012 called Plutocrats, she calls it cognitive capture. So this is, we're moving back into an EI system with EI-like conditions, with things based on labor force participation. We're looking at a basic income for people with disabilities, which reinforces the idea that some people are deserving of help and other people aren't deserving. And people are left out. There was lots of language in the speech from the throne about no one gets left behind, but they left people behind because they simply refused to talk about them. And those are the people who are hardest hit: women, Black, Indigenous, people of color, young people, people on social assistance. So all of the positive things in there, the childcare, the pharmacare, they could have done ages ago. There were opportunities for that. They're great things, but they're not going to buy boots for somebody in this Canadian winter that's coming. They're not going to buy food. And that's why Paul's so exhausted, because he's trying to feed people who don't have enough income to put meals on the table. So the bottom line in all of this is, when you say everyone, we really do mean everyone. And we need to push our governments and our leaders to get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. That's something that I noticed in the throne speech as well. The focus on helping people with disabilities just further stigmatizes poverty for people who can't prove that they deserve support, right? And so we know that there's a large number of people, you're sort of obscuring inequality there and ignoring some of the causes of poverty, as you say, like discrimination and historical trauma. So our next speaker is Chloe Halpenny. She is a founding member of the Youth Basic Income Network in Canada, and she worked on a report around gender and basic income that came out recently as well. And this has been really topical because the issue of care work and how we value care work and how women are affected by the pandemic is often at the one of the core issues that's difficult to navigate with the basic income. So Chloe, I'm wondering if you can just tell us a little bit about what you found doing that work on the basic income and how it affects gender equality.
Great, yeah, thanks, Angela. I spend a lot of my time chatting about the youth case for basic income, which I really love, but it really is the linkages between basic income and feminism and gender justice, which really brought me to the movement in the first place. So I'm really happy to be chatting about that. So the work that you're referring to is the Case for Basic Income for Women, which is part of a series of initiatives organized by lots of different basic income groups across Canada, including the ICN, that basically aims to make the case for basic income for different sectors and through different lenses. So the Case for Women started as a smaller working group that was committed to articulating the case for basic income for women's rights and gender equity. So we ended up with a statement that was sent to Minister Monsef, as well as other cabinet members, that received nearly 4,000 signatures, including from some pretty major players within Canada's feminist movement, including the Canadian Women's Foundation, LEAF, the Canadian Council of Muslim Women, as well as, I'm just throwing this in because we're at an Ottawa event, but lots of really great Ottawa groups like Octava, Planned Parenthood Ottawa, City for All Women Initiative, among others. So it was really great to see these organizations, these great feminist organizations, come together over basic income as a shared priority. So the statements, like a lot of what Sheila touched on, it highlighted challenges that were borne disproportionately by women during COVID-19, which include rates of gender-based violence rising at an estimated 20 to 30%, some say, and the increased burden of unpaid care work, trying to balance paid work and all of a sudden caring for relatives who are at home all the time. It also referenced the exclusionary nature of many income assistance programs that exist already. So we know that EI is far from a gender neutral program due to gendered patterns of work. And for all the good that it did do, CERB didn't do anything for people who were already living on low incomes, or for a lot of people who were already living on low incomes prior to the pandemic. So it also pointed to the fact that women, and especially racialized women, make up a huge proportion of high risk essential positions. Work which is also often chronically underpaid. So as far as it could in the statement, which is really a one page, it aimed to show that employment and income security are not gender neutral concepts, nor are they neutral on the basis of race, class, ability, sexual orientation, and so on. And the basic income offers one way to address this. So this is hopefully the first of many actions to come out of that working group. But I'll take the chance quickly, since I've got a couple extra minutes, to also talk a little bit about, I did my master's research just over a year ago on the Ontario Basic Income Pilot, and speaking with participants in the pilot and trying to answer the question of whether or not basic income was a feminist policy. And spoiler, the answer was that yes, it unequivocally can be, and the Ontario pilot had its issues, surely. And I think that this is a really important point to leverage, especially with a government that proclaims itself as feminist and really prides itself on its GBA plus and intersectional lens to policy. So folks that I spoke with, again, and you can tell I spend a lot of time with Sheila because I'm going to reiterate a lot of what she said, but talking about basic income as compensating for some of the economic insecurity that they face due to oppression from lots of different systems, including sexism, but also ableism, racism, ageism, or being located in a rural or remote area where jobs may not have been available or the cost of living was higher. People with experience on social assistance talked about needing to consistently prove that they were poor enough or disabled enough, and having to literally fight for benefits that kept them below poverty levels, and conditions that I framed as exactly the form of unpaid labor that feminists are so concerned with. People spoke of encountering abuse and dominance by welfare administrators and being liberated of this through basic income, as well as the stigma associated with being on social assistance, including being kind of welfare moms. So this isn't just about how basic income is feminist, but also just how profoundly unfeminist social assistance is. And it also sort of the idea of contribution and basic income opening up our potential as a society to value types of labor that are often gendered. So people spoke about volunteering at a community garden or doing the kind of emotional labor like lending a supportive ear to a neighbor who had a bad day or babysitting their friends' kids. Things that are really important in the type of world I want to live in, but hard to do when you're struggling to even put food on the table. So from a feminist perspective, I think this opens us up to conversations about care work and how it is valued and who does it and who has the luxury of engaging in self-care, and really whether basic income has a role to play in moving us towards a caring society, which I think it does. So I'll be quick. My work really aims to challenge a lot of the feminist critiques of basic income. So one thing that comes up a lot is this idea that if you give people a basic income, you hear the video games, the lazy arguments, but also that a basic income will cause women to stay at home and really cement them in care work. And I think that this is a really middle class, really white feminist thing to say, because not only have working class and women of color always had to work in the paid labor market to get by, but the idea of the formal labor market as emancipatory and liberating for everyone is just not true. I think it's also why when we're talking about the case for basic income for women and gender equity, we equally need to be talking about BIPOC folks and people with disabilities and low-income people and queer and trans folks, because we're talking about basic income as a partial solution to systems of power and systems of oppression, and we know that these systems don't work in isolation. And the other thing that we hear a lot is the idea, and Sheila mentioned this as well, that yeah, basic income is great, but we really need for gender equity are things like childcare and pharmacare and universal housing and pay equity. And yes, we do need those things. And I think it's really dangerous to pit income security and social services against one another, because we live in an incredibly wealthy country. I think we can afford to be more ambitious about the kind of country that we want to be. And I don't really want to live in a country where we're forced to choose between strong services and adequate income, because these things go hand in hand. So I could go on. I won't. I will end there for now, and I'm happy to chat more as useful. So thanks again for having me.
Thank you so much, Chloe. That was fantastic. It was so great to hear those rebuttals to the critiques that we normally hear. Our final speaker tonight is Leah Gazin, who was able to join us after a late vote at virtual parliament. Leah is the MP for Winnipeg Centre and the NDP critic for children, families, and social development. Leah has a wealth of experience as an educator and community leader in Winnipeg, particularly around human rights. She's recently put forward a motion in Parliament, Motion 46, for a guaranteed basic livable income. So Leah, we'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your motion, the movement that you've built around it. That's been really impressive to watch that grow, and maybe what you think it could do. What kind of, when we open up our imagination like this to fight for these types of policies, how does that change for all of us?
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm sorry I'm late from Treaty 1 territory. I was actually voting on a throne speech. Just want to say it's so nice to see Sheila and Chloe again, and thank you all for joining today. Like Sheila indicated, I was, I worked hard, but I couldn't get it part of the throne speech. The motion is going to be coming up in December though, so we're preparing for that. The party is taking it on. Oh, I have the microphone. I didn't have to do a silent emotion there. But anyway, after a lot of hard efforts. So this really isn't my motion. I've spoken about the motion a lot. This is a people's motion, certainly developed in consultation with the movement, including Basic Income Canada, Basic Income Manitoba, folks like Sheila Regier. I know Chloe, your organization has endorsed my motion as well. And as indicated at the beginning, I've been a long time anti-poverty human rights advocate. And one of the most vile unnecessary and willful human rights violations is poverty. Poverty is one of the most violent violations of human rights. It is a violation of human rights that we can well afford to rectify in this country. $19 billion on fighter jets, $50 million on MasterCard, $12 million on Loblaws, a wealth tax that this government refuses to put forward, offshore tax havens, and when I was elected, I represent the third poorest riding in the country. We're poor financially, but rich with heart, spirit, and ideas, and certainly organizations. And when I look outside my apartment where I live, in which is centered around 3 shelters in the city of Winnipeg, within walking distance from where I live, I find it abhorrent that people that are struggling the most, people with mental health issues that cannot work, disabled persons who have been totally left out during the pandemic, senior citizens that are literally choosing between paying for medication and being on the streets. I find that unacceptable in a country as rich as Canada. And this whole middle class discussion that I've had to unfortunately sit and listen to in the House of Commons around, people wanting to get back to work and, supporting the middle class. Well, not everybody is middle class and not everybody fits into the discussion. So I found myself in the last 2 weeks as I was really trying to push forward, the government and certainly, our party and other members of parliament to support a guaranteed, a livable basic income, is that not everybody can work. Not everybody can work. There's a woman that I'm going to tell a story. It's been a long day. There's a woman that I see that I've just kind of connected with. I've never spoken to her, but I drive up and down Main Street in Winnipeg, which is just riddled with human rights violations. And every day I drive by and I see this same woman and she's smashing her shoe on the ground and then she screams. She smashes her shoe on the ground and then she screams. Who's looking after her? She doesn't have mental health supports. She can't work clearly. She's dealing with some really serious stuff. She deserves to live with dignity and human rights. And yet in this country, we have written people off, or not even written people off. We have made certain portions of our population completely invisible, whether it's in urban centers or in First Nations communities where even access to clean drinking water, ensuring that First Nations have clean drinking water still hasn't happened, where poverty is a norm, where single persons are living off $122 every 2 weeks. There's no reason for it. And so Sheila shared all sorts of financial ways to pay for it. I'm sure she also talked about a lot of the stereotypes and fiction around what happens when you look after people. But I think we need to start changing the discussion and begin talking about the high costs of keeping people poor, increased rates of crime, increased issues with mental health, increased costs to deal with people that are having that as a result of poverty suffer issues with physical health. And so we need to move forward in a way that honors human rights. This is one motion, one action we can do alongside with our current social safety net. And I agree, it doesn't have to be either or. I've been talking about that. We don't have to choose between investing in accessible, affordable social housing and a guaranteed livable basic income. And these are not new concepts. I've been sharing with people when they say, well, the sky is going to fall. I say, well, we do have guaranteed income programs in the country. OAS is an example of a guaranteed income program. The sky didn't fall in, right? The problem is it's not livable. We have disability benefits. Again, income guarantees, not livable. We need to ensure that everybody in this country lives in dignity. And so I'm proud to work with folks around the country pushing this forward. Hopefully, if anything else becomes a main ballot question during the next election, which I think will probably be in spring. And I'm hoping that at least we can get this motion pushed forward in December so that we can have a fulsome debate in the House of Commons. It's peculiar to me. I'm not going to go on too much longer. Like nobody says, and I've said this in other webinars. Oh, those corporate bums sitting on a yacht having a cocktail on our taxpayer dollars. Nobody's saying that. Yet, when we see people struggling, dealing with some of the most vile human rights violations because of factors in their life, everybody's willing to point them out and say, get back to work. What's wrong with you? Get a job. And I think that we need to change the way we think about human rights and just support the fact that all persons, no matter where you are, no matter what's going on, that all persons have a right to live with human rights and dignity. This is in the Constitution and Charter. This is part of agreements that we have committed to with the international community and in domestic laws, yet we violate them every day. This is one way to uphold the rule of law in this country, which is not about policing and ensure that everybody can live with human rights and dignity. So I'll leave it there. And again, I apologize for being late. It was a late vote, but the 2:30 in the morning vote I did last Tuesday was much later. So it's like an early night. So thank you so much, everybody. I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you so much, Leah, for joining us. Actually, we have a couple of just very specific questions for you. Somebody asks, Joel Graham in Toronto is asking, why did you choose to favor a guaranteed livable basic income over a UBI? What is there a significance between in that language?
100%. Like, I mean, it's a guaranteed livable income, a basic income for those that don't have it. I don't need an income supplement right now. I'm a member of parliament. I'm doing okay. There's lots of people who are not doing okay. Now, I might not get elected again. I might need a guaranteed livable basic income. Who knows? It goes as the voters blow, right, and vote. But there are people in this country that do need support. And I often hear at arguments about fair. What's fair or not? Is it fair? Well, why should they get it and I'm not when I don't? But there's a reason why we have a social safety net in this country. And thank goodness for things like universal Medicare. Thank goodness for OAS. And thank goodness should we be successful, thank goodness for a guaranteed livable basic income for all. My mother used to say, I don't mean to bring my mom into this, but she used to tell me, we're all one paycheck away from the streets. You never know what can happen in life. And I want to know, not for me, but for anybody, we never know what can happen in life. And should something happen, I want to make sure that my neighbors are looked after, especially during COVID. Like people are talking about the pandemic. Nobody's talking about the long-term impacts of people who've gotten COVID, who have permanently have permanent damage to their health, whether it's breathing, being able to work full time. We know of cases in COVID where people have amputations. Who would have thought? And I need to know that whatever happens in life, people are looked after. And that's the difference for me.
Thanks, Leah. I think the option of you have it if your income goes below a certain level. So it's there for everybody if they need it.
Yeah, it's a bottom. It's the
exactly.
bottom. Yeah,
exactly.
it's
It
the
provides a
floor.
floor.
Yeah.
So you still have that security, which is very similar to actually what the basic income experiment in Dauphin provided people. They didn't get the money up front, they got it later if they needed it or if they didn't have a sufficient income. Okay, so another question, maybe for Sheila. How does a basic income interact with other things that we have, like CPP, your pension from work, employment insurance? I know in your paper that we talked about a little bit, you presented different options, but maybe could you talk about the options that you had where you had different income support programs that actually serve different purposes, and that you could still have that with the basic income? Like you can keep EI and basic income.
Right. So what Chandra and I and this team modeled in our policy options paper was primarily everything that we could do within the current tax transfer system that this modeling tool that Statistics Canada has could model for us so that it would be real. I mean, this is a real, almost a real life simulation of what would happen if you made these changes. So we didn't go into all of these other programs, many of which were designed for other purposes. We pull in social assistance, of course, as a funding source because we really do want to get rid of it. But again, if you look at programs that are already in place that are like a basic income in Canada, like seniors benefits and children's benefits, for example, you see how it's done. These other things are considered other sources of income. So if they add up and you have those sources of income, it amounts to whatever it is. And if it's not enough, your basic income will ensure that you get to a certain level. The other thing that's really important is to recognize that you want to make sure that as you have other income and as you have earnings, that you benefit from that. So in our modeling, we decided to put our reduction rate to make it a little bit more generous than the Ontario pilot, for example. They had a 50% reduction rate, ours was 40. So it means the taper off is more gradual. So you support people as they're doing better, like up into the middle income brackets. And that security part of things, I think, is what really matters. Yes, we all want to eliminate poverty, but the security really matters as well. And then we want to make sure that, you know, the people like me and Leah pay our fair share as well. And we give out enormous tax breaks to people who don't need them, and we really should stop that.
I agree. Speaking to the converted, yeah, for sure. There are all kinds of tax breaks that middle-class Canadians get, and one of the Liberals' first priorities in this Parliament a year ago was to further cut taxes for middle-class Canadians. So, at a cost of about $6 billion a year to the federal treasury. So Liz asks, you know, what are some of the benefits of guaranteed annual income? What are some of the counter arguments that we can make? She notes that she wrote an essay on a guaranteed annual income in 1969 in her political theory class. So this is certainly not a new idea. It's one that's coming back around. So Chloe, because you did research on the provincial pilot, I'm wondering if you can tell us what are some of the federal provincial issues and how can we overcome those? Are there jurisdictional issues that come into play? Because social assistance is at the provincial level.
Yeah, I think that this is definitely something that Sheila and Leah can probably speak to more, but I think that is a big focus right now, especially as we're moving towards a time where a basic income feels like it's something that might actually happen. And I think that the question of federal, provincial, jurisdictional issues, where is this actually going to fall, is something that's definitely come up. One thing I can say is I think there is evidence that provinces are willing to work with the federal government. So, for instance, PEI, I know, has expressed a willingness to sort of work collaboratively with the federal government as they look to do a basic income pilot there. I know there's been some inklings of hopefulness in BC as well for that. So I think that there is willingness on behalf of some provinces to sort of start having those conversations. But I mean, I think it's not unheard of to have to. I mean, and again, we and Sheila probably can speak more to this than me. But I don't think that this is probably the first time that provinces and the federal government will have to have a conversation about where jurisdiction falls. Like, this isn't a new thing. This is how our government system works in Canada. And obviously, with social assistance being provincially administered, and we are, I think, most of us talking about something that would be administered federally, ideally through the mechanisms of the tax systems that have allowed sort of CERB to be administered. I don't know if Sheila or Leah want to add on to anything there.
Sheila or Leah, do you have anything to add? The federal provincial jurisdictional issues? Sheila?
A little bit. So COVID is interesting in this perspective now, because you have a federal government that recognized there was a national issue that needed to be resolved. And who knows how long COVID is going to last. But if you look at the impact province by province, I mean, I've seen indications of things like Alberta has been really heavy CERB users. In Ontario, I've got some information from a colleague that shows that initially social assistance roles started to go down. So the caseloads went down as that handful of people on social assistance who had some employment earnings qualified for CERB. So you see the interaction, and it would seem to me that provinces would start understanding that if CERB goes by the wayside, or if EI isn't covering people, their welfare caseloads are going to go up. And my other answer is wearing my old National Council of Welfare hat that dealt with provincial and territorial social service administrators for years and consulted with everybody around the country on this. Everybody hates social assistance. Like, I don't understand why the provinces would want to hang on to it. Everybody hates it. The clients, the workers, the administrator, like, nobody wins from a program where nobody gets better. So
absolutely.
I don't understand that. So Leah's going to have to, maybe, I don't understand.
Yeah, absolutely, Sheila. And I just wanted to add, you know, the system is set up to dehumanize people that need help, even though, you know, we pay into these systems. You know, people that are having to get, in Manitoba, we call it EIA, or social assistance, are so dehumanized for an income supplement that is completely not livable, and the way in which it's administrated in such an inhumane way, and a guaranteed livable income takes away that inhumane bureaucracy for people that are experiencing poverty.
I have another question, because Paul was not able to be here tonight, and hopefully the three of you can take a minute to address this. We've touched on this idea of deserving and undeserving poor. And there's an idea that if you give people a basic income, they'll just be lazy and they won't work. And the reason that they're not working right now is because they're lazy. What do you think that it's important to dig into that idea and to expose some of the racism and ableism behind that idea in order to better advocate for a basic income? Or how do you think that we confront some of these issues in Canadian society? Whoever wants to take that first. Chloe?
That one that's one of my favorites.
Awesome. Okay.
No, because, okay, and there's two sides of this coin, because the lazy one is something that you hear all the time. And yeah, you're absolutely right that the lazy argument is disproportionately targeted at racialized folks, at disabled folks, at young people. Like, that's not a neutral insult. And on one side of the coin, it's not evidence-based. Like, there have been pilots and experiments around basic income that demonstrate that departures from the labor market are actually quite low. And I understand the need to articulate that from a political, making sure gaining support perspective. But I don't care if people are lazy, quite frankly, from a totally personal perspective, because I think that being lazy, like the idea of who gets to be lazy, I think is really very privileged. And I think Leah said it really well before, is that when wealthy people are taking a vacation, or they're on a cruise, or they're drinking on a beach, then it's a vacation. But if a poor person, God forbid, isn't working 50 hours a week at McDonald's, then all of a sudden they're super lazy. Like, I think it's like, I understand it from an evidence perspective in terms of articulating that, but I do think that there is a need for really a societal shift in how we think about who deserves money and who is lazy, and like just confronting what laziness is and who gets to be lazy. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Sheila, you had your hand up. I think you wanted to jump in here, and then Leah will go.
I'm aspiring to be lazy. Like, I made middle class. I'm aspiring to laziness now. Now, I think one of the things I think that is like a really unfortunate, again, it's horrible that we had to have COVID in order to see the light in terms of a bunch of failings. And it's horrible that we have had to see Black American deaths in large number to make us really wake up and realize some things. But I think the Black Lives Matter movement and similar sort of efforts have really helped raise attention to this and raise the bar around this kind of deserving and undeserving thing. And I think it behooves us all to call it out more than we ever did. And I say that as, for people who don't know me, I mean, you see this white face here. I am the white minority in my family. My son is Black, living in Florida. Lord love him. And I've done an awful lot of reading on like Black history and, the creation of our countries, based on slavery, based on colonialism and all of these things. If you look historically at successive waves of immigrants coming into any country, they are always, it doesn't matter who they are, they can be Black slaves, they can be Italians, they can be Polish, they can be Jewish. They always end up being lazy and morally deficient. Like it's just pervasive in our societies to do that kind of thing. And we have to call it out and stop it. I mean, we pretend we're kinder and gentler in Canada, but every time I hear this work disincentive thing now, it's like, no, that's not what we're talking about. And Chloe's right, like, we need this sort of evidence for the economists and whatever, but that's not what this is about.
I agree. I think when we're talking about a work disincentive, what we should be talking about is that phase out that you were talking about, so that if somebody has work, it always pays. They're not penalized for working, so you don't have that welfare wall. But that most people are not sitting at home on social assistance because they're lazy and unmotivated. Yeah, so Leah, could you speak to?
I just wanted to talk about the whole notion of like being poor is a lot of work. Being poor is a full-time job. Trying to figure out where you're going to stay every night, trying to find food, trying to find proper supports, and you can't access proper supports. And, and so I think even understandings of poor being lazy is delusional. It's a delusional construct that has been imposed by neoliberal thinkers and right-wing thinkers. The other thing is absolutely it has to do with race and class. I'm an Indigenous woman, a professional, interviewed in the news, a longtime advocate, and I would read the comments. Why don't you go out and get a real job? And I'm teaching full-time at a university. advocating full time as a president of the Social Planning Council of Winnipeg. Absolutely, this has to do with racism. And the poorest folks in this country are Indigenous peoples. We are homeless on our own lands, wrongfully dispossessed of our lands. We own less than 1% of the natural resources in this country, or we're given revenues. They're on our lands. And we were left homeless on our own lands. And we find ourselves on the streets of urban centers. And instead of, you want justice? Well, then we better start following the Constitution, which also includes Indigenous human rights. Poverty is a violent human rights violations. And one of the first things that we're talking about guaranteed livable basic income, but it's all connected. One of the first things that they did in the Indian Act was to not allow us to participate in the economy. And now we're poor. We have high rates of poverty. And we need to change that. A guaranteed livable basic income, for example, on reserve, would be a game changer, would give us an income to start economies that were wrongfully taken away. Guaranteed livable basic incomes with access to affordable, accessible social housing and proper mental health and trauma supports. It's not one or the other. It has to be alongside, as in paragraph 5 of the motion, with our current social safety net to make sure that people are looked after. It's not okay that we turn a blind eye to human rights movements, starting with and there's been long histories of human rights movements in this country. This is a really important piece to really deal with human rights violations in this country, to make sure that everybody can live with human rights and dignity, and this would provide that. And so that's one of the reasons why I've been fighting so hard in the House of Commons alongside of people who've been advocating, people like Sheila and Chloe and so many others across the country. Senator Kim Pate, in Senate has been a real leader on this. It's time that we ensure that everybody that lives on Turtle Island can live with human rights and dignity.
Thank you, Leah. And you mentioned the Senate. There are senators who are supportive of a basic income. The Liberal government has talked about it. The Green Party has talked about it. Former conservative senators like Hugh Segal. Does it feel like, I know you have some co-sponsors from other parties on the motion. Does it feel like there's cross-party support, that there's a cross-party dialogue?
They're absolutely 100%. I have support from all the different parties. There's over 50 senators that are supporting this motion, which is good because a debate is a start. I mean, it kind of went from zero about a month ago, and now we're at like maybe a debate in December. So, it's like a huge momentum. I heard, for example, Liberal MPs bring it up during debates. I was sitting in the House the last 3 weeks on duty. I just recently got back to Winnipeg. I'm in isolation now, but bringing it up as a potential option in the House of Commons, I think. With CERB, I think people are realizing that it is possible. There's so many people that are being left behind. I have over 100 cases of COVID in our community. The arts community, the gig economy is gutted, and it might not, be up and running for a long time. We need to make sure that people can be looked after. The last thing I want to bring up, and I don't want to hog all the time, but this is a public health and safety issue. If you look at one of the key recommendations they've made during the pandemic, exactly what I'm doing right now is to physically distance yourself and to wash your hands frequently. Well, that requires a home, and that requires access to water. I have that privilege. I stopped and bought a pile of groceries before I crossed the Manitoba border. Forgot body wash, we'll probably have to get somebody to throw it through my window, but I have a lot of privilege. So many of my neighbors that are living in tents right now, or in the shelters, or on the streets, and it's getting cold in Winnipeg, don't have that privilege. We need to address that. We need to build a country that's humane, and a place where humanity becomes part of the political discussion. That is a struggle in the House of Commons, and we need to fight and change that.
Thank you, Leah. And just to finish that point, a couple of you have asked in the chat about the intersection between a basic income and defunding the police. And Chloe has pointed out that Robin Maynard's book, Policing Black Lives, actually has an excellent chapter on welfare and social assistance in that. So we recommend.
Can I ask? Can I make a comment, please?
Sorry, Yvonne, but I do actually, your question's next. We've got your question submitted. Yvonne asks if you have any information with regards to Canada Disability Benefit that was announced in the throne speech. Are there any details about that yet? And Sheila, do you know?
Can't find my unmute button. No, we don't have details on it, but we do know that the disability community is getting its act together really, really quickly. Evelyn Forget was part of a meeting with about 500 people from the disability community today. And she gave a presentation talking about, you know, all of the things that matter in terms of people with disabilities, but also making the connections, as we were talking about with deservedness, that we'd all be better off if there was a basic income for everyone. If I can just quickly add to the last question too about policing and whatever, there is a group in Toronto that Chris Glover, who's NDP MPP for whatever that riding is. Anyway, there is a group in Toronto that's working with some of these really highly racialized neighborhoods who themselves have identified that the guns came in the minute the money went out. So they're now dealing with second generation sort of welfare cuts coming from the Harris years that never got restored and now are facing even further austerity. But they will tell you the gun problem is an income problem. So, you know, a police solution is not going to fix that.
Exactly. My first thing after I got my master's was I wrote The Cost of Poverty in Nova Scotia, and the link between income security and being jailed. So the criminalization of poverty and the connections, especially for communities that are racialized, who are more likely to be perceived as a threat by the police in the first place. And then the impact that that has on your lifelong income security, obviously, is a huge problem. So, and continues to be. This is an excellent question, and I would just like very short answers from all of you. Ricab on Zoom asks, can we get a livable universal basic income without deconstructing capitalist economic structures? Is it possible? Or is this something that we can do that will help us make the economy fair, restructure the economy, or is it just not possible under our current power structures?
Can I answer that?
Sure.
Very quickly. Okay, here's the thing about that argument. You know, I'm a raging socialist, you know, self-declared, published raging socialist. Here's the thing, you know, and I was in academia for many years, you know, people living on the streets, freezing on the sidewalk in Winnipeg Center happens every year, addicted to crystal meth. They don't have time for privileged discussions about capitalist systems. We need to ensure people get what they need to be housed, to eat. These are basic human rights. And unfortunately, in this growing capitalist dictatorship, it's becoming more and more compromised, especially with the pandemic. So although I appreciate that political argument in theory, I think that we have emergency actions right now to make sure that people are looked after, and that's kind of my position on that one. But I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Leah. That reminds me of Cindy Blackstock's argument around children. We can't, the children can't wait, right? They're growing up in poverty right now. People are living in poverty right now, and they can't wait for us to get our act together. And so we have to try to take care of them now. So final question. What is one action that you recommend everyone on the call take tonight or tomorrow to get us closer to making Leah's motion a reality? Or the people's motion that Leah has put forward. Sheila, do you want to go first?
No, but I will if you force me. It's really hard. And I think I reflect on many, many years of being in the basic income movement and knowing that everybody has different skills and talents and connections and different things that they can do. And everything is going to matter. I mean, certainly everybody needs to sign Leah's motion, but if you're an academic and you're teaching a class, talk about it. If you're a young person and you're part of a group, talk about it. If you're part of a Chinese community, I just did a workshop with them in Toronto. Amazing. So like there's so many things that people can do. You know, Chandra had the brilliance to be able to write our policy options report. Not everybody can do that, but there are other academics out there who are writing. Chloe's thesis, like find what you do best and find a way to get in there and let your community, your politicians, everybody know.
Great advice. Thanks, Sheila. Chloe?
I have two, and one I think one is more applicable to Leah's the people's notion than others. But the first I will pitch for folks on this call who are interested, please, the Basic Income Canada Youth Network, which was mentioned in my bio. Anybody can sign up for a newsletter. You don't have to be a youth, but if you are under 35 and a basic income supporter, we'd love for you to become a member. We send out my co-chair Kendall makes fantastic newsletters and sends them out each month that have really great ways to get involved and up to date in what we've been doing. The other thing is, and I totally agree with what Sheila's saying about find what works for you and do it. But write your MP. And I know that you hear that. Everyone hears that. I'm 24. I haven't written my MP ever, I think, until this year. But they're answering. Like we've been writing a lot of different MPs. We've been getting answers, and we've been getting answers and interest from people that we didn't necessarily expect answers and interest from. So yeah, give it a shot. Because I think the more people that they hear it from is when they're going to start to take it seriously, especially from constituents.
So just on that note, if you go to the website at leahgazan.ca/basic income, and if you put in a postal code, you can tell everybody you know, it actually will direct you directly to your MP to sign a letter that will be sent to your MP's mailbox. So, and also senators, please send messages to senators, sign the petition at leahgazan.ca/basic income. And if you're part of an organization and you want to endorse the motion, please just send an email to our office at leah.gazan@parle.gc.ca. I believe it's on the website as well. We're the easiest people to find. And we'll certainly be happy to get more endorsements. I just want to thank before we leave this invite today, but I also want to commend, it really is the people's motion. Sheila was a big part of developing this motion. This is not my motion. And Chloe, all the hard work, that we've been on a few panels, I believe that this is the moment. And if we push hard, there is possibilities.
Thanks, Leah. I think so. I've been having conversations with people about basic income for a few years. And when I joined the labor movement, there were a lot of skeptics. But people are starting to come around and starting to understand that what they have been proposing, which is social assistance that's kinder with a higher level of income support isn't that far from what we're proposing, which is like, we want people to be better off and we want people to be taken care of. And we want to structure our society in a way that everybody can live in dignity and be supportive. So thank you so much, all of you, for coming and sharing this information with us tonight. The links to the email and the motion that you can support are in the chat. Also to the Basic Income Youth Network. Just one more pitch before you go. We're going to be having on October 14th a fundraiser for the federal party. Leah said there might be an election in the spring. And so we want to raise some money before that happens. So the fundraiser is called Whiskey and War Stories. And we're inviting people to tell their favorite funny stories from the campaign trail. We've got Ed Broadbent and some current and former MPs and some staffers that it should be quite entertaining. So check out our webpage at ownndp.ca and you can sign up for that there. Thanks, everyone.